He'd always see things the rest of us couldn't. Others speculated that he was simply too large for this world. Though Brandon claimed to be 6'6", because that was all the height most people could fathom, he was actually a quarter-inch over 6'8". And not a spindly 6'8" either, but 232 pounds of meat and bone stacked vertically beneath a lopsided smile and a defiant wedge of hair that gave him the appearance of an unfinished sculpture. His size had always triggered unreasonable expectations. Art teachers claimed that his unusual bird paintings were as extraordinary as his body. Basketball coaches babbled about his potential, until he quit hoops for good after watching that huge Indian in Cuckoo's Nest drop the ball in the hole for a giddy Jack Nicholson. Tall women fawned over his potential, too, until they heard his confusing raves and snorting laughs or took a closer look at his art. Near dusk, Brandon wheeled up northward past the No Casino yard signs toward the nonchalant border. A geographical handshake, heralded here by nothing more than a drainage ditch that turned raucous with horny frogs in the spring and overflowed into both countries every fall. The ditch was one of the few landmarks along the nearly invisible boundary that cleared the Cascades and fell west through lush hills that blurred the line, no matter how aggressively it was chainsawed and weed-whacked. From there, as thin as a rumor, the line cut through lakes and swamps and forests and fields. After turning into a ditch for a few miles, the line climbed one more hill before dropping again, slicing through Peace Arch Park and splashing into salt water. The park was all most travelers saw of the border, but locals drove into the valley to gawk at this ditch that divided the two countries and created a rural strip where Canadians and Americans drove on parallel two-lane roads, Boundary Road to the south and Zero Avenue to the north, just a grassy gutter away from each other, waving like friendly neighbors. Until recently, that is. Most passers-by didn't notice anything different. The soggy, fertile valley still rolled out for miles in every direction until it bumped into a horseshoe of mountains, Alp-like peaks to the north, a jagged range to the east, and Mount Baker's massive year-round snowball to the southeast. It gave the impression the only way out was west, through the low-slung San Juan Islands. There were still orderly rows of raspberry canes, fields bigger and greener than the Rose Bowl, and dozens of pungent dairies, with most of the cows hooked to computers that automated feeding and maximized the river of milk exiting daily in the metal bellies of tankers the size of oil trucks. But a closer look hinted at the changes. Many barns and silos had nothing to do with cattle or farms anymore. U.S. border towns no longer served as burger pit stops for Canadian skiers dragging home from Baker, and 19-year-old Americans stopped rallying across the line for the novelty of legal drinking. Yet despite the slump in legitimate commerce, a curious construction boom was taking place on both sides. New cul-de-sacs rolled north like advancing armies, and young Canadians continued stacking trophy homes on abrupt hills with imperial views of America. Brandon trolled Boundary Road past the home of Sophie Winslow, the masseuse who seemingly everyone visited but nobody knew. A black sedan cruised the Canadian side of the ditch, the driver avoiding eye contact and accelerating as Brandon closed in on his family's 34-acre dairy with its 3 barns, 1 silo, and 2-story house that looked naked in the winter without blooming willows or a dinghy full of tulips pulling your eyes off its weathered planks. Overhead lights brightened the back barn, where his father, no doubt, was resanding teak already rubbed smooth as brass, while obsessing over what he still couldn't afford, such as a mast, sails, or a reliable diesel. A television winked through the kitchen window. Was Jeopardy already on? The show exercised his mother's memory, as she put it, at least when she remembered to watch it. Brandon glanced back across the ditch at the row of houses along Zero Avenue. Did Madeleine Rousseau still live with her father? How long it had been since he'd even talked to her?